Okay, these are the 3 long run mistakes I see the most, and if you fix it, you'll find 10%. And if you think about it, you only need 5% to go from, if you're training for a sub 3 hour marathon, to run 2 hour 50, which will qualify you for Boston and get you a good for age time for London. So it's a great time. So first off, what are we trying to do? We're trying to run as fast as we possibly can on one morning, on one day. And so if I think back to the way I trained when I was a kid at East Cheshire Harriers, Tuesday night on the track as fast as I possibly could go. Thursday night again on the track, competitive with the lads, fartlek session as fast as I could go, a 9 or a 10 out of 10. When it came to the weekend, usually a Saturday a race, and then Sunday long slow distance, because it had to be, because I was so worn out from training too hard too frequently. And a kid can handle that. You can throw anything at a kid and they'll absorb it, but the adults are following the same system. What we miss, those adults, what they're missing, if they're following that same pattern, is they're going long, slow distance, essentially training for something else, because it's completely different biomechanics than what they want to do when they're running their goal pace, their goal time for the marathon. And when they go fast, they go as fast as they possibly can. And so we're missing that middle component. And if you think about it, what we could do, and logically this would work, is you could start from your goal, your dream marathon pace, and run 1 mile at that marathon pace, next week 2 miles, next week 3 miles, and on until you get to 26 miles. And in theory, sounds logical, and in theory could work. And that sounds crazy, but it is not far off the way a lot of runners think. What we could do if we attack it from a different angle is every weekend we could run 26 miles, and we could start off as slow as we can possibly go so we can handle the distance, and it would take us a long time. And then every week we do exactly that 26.2 miles, but it gets faster. And again, it could work. And again, it's not far off the way a lot of runners approach the marathon. What both of those methods are doing, and what your online calculators are doing, is picking the outcome before you've got anywhere near understanding what you're capable of. If you've just ran 10 weeks ago, 3 hours 20 for the marathon, and you want to move forward 10%, you could start working at 6:50 a mile, 4:15 a kilometer, and play with that pace, faster, slower, and at exactly. But what's probably going to happen if you pick the goal too far, it's too ambitious, is you're going to overstrive in order to train for who you want to be in the future. And so there are much better ways to go at this. And ironically, not only are they more methodical, but you can stack the consistency. It's much more sustainable and manageable for the body. So mistake number 1, and the most common mistake, as I've just said with the club system, is running long, but long, slow distance, nothing specific. There is a time and a place for that. But without the structure, we're training for something different, both physiologically, biomechanically, and it is reassuring to be out there for time on the feet, to be out there for the time that you want to be or the distance that you want to be out there for. But if you're training for something different, it's going to hit you in the second half and the final third of the marathon. And what you'll chalk that up to is, well, I didn't have the endurance. And so what you'll do is add more of exactly what wasn't working. And you'll probably add a higher frequency of those longer, slower distance runs. So mistake number 2, and this is again very common, going back to that analogy of let's start at 1 mile, gradually move up. That's going to be okay for some time. And then all of a sudden, if the goal that we've picked, that marathon pace that we've picked, is too high, we're going to overstrive, we're going to overreach, and we're going to wear ourselves out, so you won't be able to stack the consistency across many weeks and months in order to prepare you for something as grueling as the marathon. And what you would chalk that up to is, my body couldn't handle the training. How often do we hear that? Try training for a marathon, my body couldn't handle the training. It's because when we're running at what we want to run for marathon pace 3 months, 6 months, 12 months from now, that's costing us too much. So we're going too high in effort, working on efficiencies that are not going to be any use for us at any stage in the marathon, but it makes us feel good for a short term until we have a setback in the form of injury or illness. The reason that this is so difficult and those mistakes, two mistakes, are so common is because we're training an individual, a version of ourselves that doesn't currently exist. And that is the reason for the third mistake. And the third mistake is confusing marathon effort in training versus marathon pace, what we're going to be capable of for the marathon. And the best way I can think to explain this is, again, I always like to use the extremes so it makes it more obvious. Let's say that instead of going out there and running a marathon every week and getting progressively quicker, like that second analogy, we break up the distance of a marathon, and initially it's 26 times a mile, and we're going out there and we're running at a reasonable pace estimate, and we're able to do 26 times a mile. It's a lot of distance, I know, but this is an extreme example. And then we'd move on to, after a few weeks, 13 times 2 miles, and eventually 4 times 6 miles, 2 times 13 miles. We'd still be aiming to run a pace that is different. Hello, hello, hello. What's your name? Come here, come here. 6, 7. Come here. Then, hey, come here. Come here. Okay, well, be quiet when we're filming. Which way? You'd still be breaking the distance up to run a pace that is going to feel different on the day. You're going to freshen up with a taper. You're no longer going to be untrained, fatigued, accumulated fatigue from all the training and consistency that you're putting together. It's still going to be a different feeling on race day. And this catches out a lot of people. To further explain it, another extreme example, if we've got a guy in Texas, in the Texas summer heat, training for Chicago Marathon, perfect conditions usually on Chicago Marathon start line, he's training for that cooler day. If he is training in the Texas heat, 100, 110 Fahrenheit, constantly hitting that marathon pace, how much more is it going to be costing him in terms of not just effort and energy for the session, but the recovery, and not able to recover on time to put the consistency together with the number of sessions that he would need to put together in order to put him on Chicago start line, optimally fit, specifically fit enough to run his fastest time. This is why I always say it's a moving target. We don't know what you're capable of on optimal training, or the optimal training for you, given all your life factors that we need to take into consideration. And if you've been in marathon training, you'll know how that feels. You've got this block of training to do, you've got the exam, you've got the race date coming up, and then a run completely wipes you out, so that when it comes to the next quality session, you're not really ready for it. You still execute it because you're time crunched, but it's not really giving you the result, it's not giving you the super compensation, and you're certainly not getting the adaptation from the session, and therefore you're not able to piece together the consistency. So what's a better way? What you can do is this. If you open your last marathon that you did, open the Garmin file, Strava, it will give you the average heart rate, and you'll probably see a graph that drifts slightly up. Think of yourself finishing as fast as you possibly can in the last 3 to 6 miles. But let's say the average is 160 for round numbers. You're starting at 155, you're finishing at 165. It's quite a narrow range, but it gives you an example. You've got a 10 beat range between 155 and 165 beats where you operate in the marathon. And during the marathon, that 155, 160 and 165 to you feels like a 5, 155, 160, feels like a 6, and that 7 out of 10 perceived effort is your 165, for example. So what you could do is play with that pocket that you've seen you can hold for the duration of the marathon. And that would work, and it would work certainly better than 1 mile the first week, 2 miles the second week, and certainly better than you running 26 miles every week. And a better indication, with more control, you stacking the consistency, than most marathon training programs. What is really difficult about doing that is, think of that guy back in Texas. You need to completely let go of pace and work within that pocket. And if initially that is getting you 10 minutes a mile and you're just losing your mind because 6 months from now you want to tell your grandma you've ran 2 hours and 59 minutes, you're not going to be able to put the consistency together. And that's the trap that gets most people, certainly in the marathon, but in all distance running. So what you're doing with that is you're letting go of what's worked, and instead of forcing a pace, you're building and leaning into a system.